I wanted to do a few videos. I'm just going to refer to them as live, and basically what it is, when I spot a gap situation, I'm going to record it so that you can see how it works and understand. Sometimes people get the wrong idea about how you view things or how you look at things, and so when you have a situation like we have right here, I'm going to explain that this is a gap down excuse me, and show you the evidence to prove it. And today is, as you can see over here on the chart, June 2nd, 2017, and we're in the symbol ATSG. And one of the key things that we have is divergence, and I'll share that with you up front. If you excuse me, if we back up 2 days and we look at this candle right here, we see that trend red is in a BOC lower pattern, and power red is just barely in a BOC higher pattern, and that's divergence, and it caused a fairly good drop. It closed on the vertical line day. It closed at $23.85, and it opened at $22.60. So it gapped down a little over $1. Then it came back up, and right now on this vertical line day, we have a trend red BOC higher and a power red BOC lower. And this is an excellent divergent situation. And the reason it's so important is because trend red and power red are 2 out of the 3 big 3 that we refer to, and we watch those quite often, or quite heavily. I maybe is a better way of saying it. The other the other big 3 member is Swing Zion. And those 3 make up the big 3. And so when we see 2 of those 3 in divergence, we identify something. And what we've got right here is it's just a classic move in a gap down situation. Remember, in a gap down, you have to have all of the conditions within 3 patterns: the identical patterns, and the down touch or up touch patterns, and the proximity group or power 4 group. This would include the pink, blue, white, and yellow as the power 4, plus the power Zion. And so you have to have the necessary activity within each of those 3 groups going on simultaneously, and then you end up with a gap. And in this case here, we're seeing a gap down. In an up-touch situation, just like in a down-touch situation, within the trend indicators, the red, green, and gray can up-touch the 3 trio lines, yellow, pink, blue, or they can excuse me, or they can up-touch the 0 line, or they can up-touch above the blue line. And when they do that, they cause, remember, your up-touch above the blue line is an area above the blue line, but there's no line that they up-touch. It's just that it overpasses the blue line and ends up there somewhere higher above the blue line. That is, the trend red ends up higher above the blue line. And the other requirement for this is, you can see right here, trend red needs to pass over or pass through the trio, the trend trio, blue, pink, yellow, on its move up. We like to also say that it crosses zero, and it definitely does that in a downturn, in a situation where you're looking at a gap down situation, because in a gap down situation, trend red can hit one of the three trio lines, or zero, or pass through zero and go down underneath zero. That being said, the primary requirement for when trend red gaps down and passes or crosses over zero, that crossover point is the signal for the next day up, or in other words, a gap up if you have all three gap down conditions. In this situation, we have again passed through zero and passed through all three of those lines, and the trend red is now above the blue line. And we normally see the gray and the green pass through zero as well, but in this case here, green has passed through the zero line, and green is now up touching the pink. And you probably heard me say in other videos that when red or green up touch the pink line, that's a strong down movement. So we know with the crossover of red above blue, and the fact that it has crossed over the zero line on the same day, that's the signal for in the trend chart. In the trend chart, that's the signal for the next day down. Now, with gray way up high, gray is now over 30 right now, which is significantly high. And as a result of that, we don't necessarily need a crossover, because there's a premise that we also deal with that happens with zip red and zip gray. Those two pairs, when you have a spike down, the gray ends up in red, it reverses back up a little bit stronger than it would on some occasions, because gray is lower than red. Likewise, when gray is higher than red, same thing can happen. It's kind of like a supporting evidence thing. It obviously depends on conditions as to how deep the gap will be or how high the gap will be on the zip ideas. But that idea carries through over here onto the trend chart. We have trend gray that's way high. Red is at 10. Trend gray is now at 29.7. In this example, we're live trading right now on June 6th, 2017. Now, that separation has the desire to pull those two back together, because for a couple of different reasons. Trend gray usually bounces near around zero, which has a tendency to pull it back, and because of the distance between the two, it's basically a type of divergence, if you will, in that it's a large separation. So we have the divergence in the trend red BOC higher and the power red BOC lower. We have the big separation between trend red and trend gray. All the trend red and gray are above the blue line, which is good. Green has up-touched into the pink line, which is great. The trend category or trend chart tells us that there's going to be a nice gap down tomorrow. Looking into the power chart down here, this is a condition that we see reasonably often, and it's a condition in which the power yellow line is separated from the other lines. That works both going up and going, the power yellow line going up and the power yellow line going down. In this case here, they're separated while at the same time the power yellow is up touching the orange line. And remember, the division is the orange line. We use the orange line as a division between the power 4 and the power Zion. When, for example, the the power 4 are all above 0 and the power Zion is under 0, you oftentimes get a nice gap up when you have the other conditions in the trend chart and the identical indicator requirements. And by identical indicator requirements, I mean that you need 12 out of the 22 market force indicators or a majority in a 1, 2, or 3 pattern group. In other words, you can have 12 identical indicators, meaning they're all like this. Gray one here is a BOC higher pattern, and we know when you get BOC higher patterns on a peak, they're a push up real strong, and because of that push up real strong, it ends up being over purchased or overbought, resulting in a pushback the following day, and so when we get a lot of BOCs on a peak, not necessarily all of them are that way, you understand what I'm saying, but there are several of them that are zip yellow over here is also identical situation to that. So now when the other part of the Zip Zion criteria is that Zip Zion, as I mentioned, is under 0 or under the orange line, and the 4 lines are above the orange line. Exception to that is when you have 3 days down, and sometimes power blue and even the white will be under the orange in a gap up next day. And in that case, the Zion would be lowest, and then blue and white would be right under it, and all 3 of those would be underneath the orange, and then that would gap up the next day. And that would be like with 3 days down in all of the lines. Excuse me. It'd be like a bottlenose, or think of a bottlenose pattern. Now, when gray, what you need, you have a stronger gap up when the Zion line is under orange and the power 4 lines are above the orange. But the reciprocal situation is true as well. When Zion is above orange and the other 4 are under orange, that gives you a stronger movement. But obviously you have to identify the signal, and that's what's important. And just like here, we had a similar signal right here 2 days back, in that we identified and saw that gray was high, the red bounced into the yellow, the green bounced into the pink a little bit. It wasn't real close to the pink, but it was over the yellow. And then I had a number of other situations that still qualified for a gap down. And I didn't count the indicators, but I'm sure they're fairly high on this vertical green line day. Because keep in mind, it did gap down from that 2385 down to that 2260 at the open. So that distance, we obviously saw the gap, but now we're having another round at it. We're having another gap situation, and this one should be stronger. Now, that being said, you watch. I'll have 3-4 days of small red candles, but I don't think so. I think it's got enough power in it to especially when we see the separation of the gray and the red. The gray, the red is, trend red right now is 813 and trend blue is 821. So trend red has now dropped underneath the blue line. So if it doesn't go back up by the end of the day, the gap may not be as strong. We like to see that trend red over, now, did I misread that? Now trend red is 913 and trend blue is 836. It's back up over, I may have just misread that, I'm not sure. It's now back up over the blue line again. And it's at 946, so there's a little rally going on at the moment. So anyway, that's what those two show us. And then if you you obviously can see what the identical pattern that we're talking about. It's a BOC pattern, and we typically just count it as a BOC. If it's a BOC higher pattern, then it has just all that more strength. But we literally have over 20. I didn't do an exact count, but the majority of them are in a BOC lower pattern. And when you have a majority in the BOC lower pattern, then it's an indication that remember, a BOC lower is just from your old school trading ideas. A BOC lower is nothing more than a lower high, or what? Or a downtrend, the start of a downtrend. So when you have a peak, then it goes down and then it comes back up, but the up is not as high as the peak, that is a lower high, and that is the term some use for a downtrend. And because of that, I would say again we're going to have a stronger gap. We're still an hour away from the close, so I don't know. We're about 56 minutes away from the close. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. Other than I'm reasonably positive we're going to have a gap. If we don't have a gap, we should have a really nice red candle and maybe several red candles. But it definitely looks like a gap. We have confirmation over here. If you take the green line and put it over there, we have another lower high on this day compared with the day that we're now looking at, which is the June 2nd, 2017, today. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. I'm going to label these videos live. I've done others. If you haven't seen them, whenever you see something live, this is basically what I'm doing. I'm giving you the information ahead of time, showing you that it works. It's not something that because sometimes you can get lost in looking at the lines, and especially when the lines are not clear, like on a video. And this is why I suggest that you always, as soon as you figure out what symbol I'm in and where I'm at, go to that live on the platform and look at the evidence. It's much clearer there if you just follow along that way than if you have to watch on the video. If you are watching on the video and only choose to do it that way, just press the full screen button, because that again will give you more visibility, because it's hard to see these lines on a video. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoy the system. I'm excited about the system. I think you can tell that. We have just an unbelievable amount of abilities within the system to help us be confident day traders.